I began writing this sermon sitting in a coffee house, unmasked, and more relaxed about that fact than I have been in over a year. After the CDC announced on Thursday that fully vaccinated people could be safely indoors and outdoors without masks, except for crowds, my first desire was to sit relaxed in a coffee shop. And yet I remember just a couple months ago when I first sat vaccinated and unmasked in a coffee shop, I felt so brave, but rushed out within 15 minutes after gulping my drink. After more than a year of restrictions, feeling safe is complicated. As a community of people, we are also complicated. Some are vaccinated, some are not. Some have hopped on planes, others remain close to home. Some happily reach out to hug, others cautiously keep their distance. As a human community, there are inevitably differences among us. With varied experiences, concerns, and tolerances, we respond differently to risk and to possibilities. Moreover, as a religious community committed to religious freedom and inclusive values, Unitarian Universalists are notorious for wide-ranging differences of opinions within their ranks. Here are a couple UU jokes to illustrate. A UU meeting must seem strange to outsiders. A person will speak and say nothing, nobody listens, and then everybody disagrees. Or, what do you get if you put two Unitarian Universalists together? 3 opinions. I need a laugh track. It's kind of quiet in here. We joke, and still there is an important insight here. As a religious community committed to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, that means we are going to rub shoulders or share Zoom rooms with people that hold different opinions about divinity, about music, about activism, about safety. By aiming to leave space for difference, an inherent tension is built into our way of being religious community. In some ways, it would be so much easier to simply agree. There could be some relief in saying, this is what we believe, here, read this creed. Rather than complicated ambiguity and diversity, there could be certainty. And yet, many of us know what comes from declarations of bright lines delineating boundaries of belonging, believing, and behaving. From such certainty emerge judgments of who is out, who does not measure up, who does not belong. Such drawing of lines may not only generate feelings of exclusion, it may also erupt into violent contests to police the border of who is in and who is not. We are seeing that eruption of violence now in Gaza and Israel as complicated of a religio-political situation as there has ever been. Yes, there can be a tug towards certainty, but there can also be a real and violent cost. So much of life is complicated and complex. Author Ursula K. Le Guin quips, "I never knew anybody who found life simple. I think a life or a time looks simple when you leave out the details." Le Guin's idea reminds me of a distinction in philosophical conversations between thick and thin descriptions of humanity. As the language suggests, a thin description conveys generalities, a skim coat depiction of a person or situation. In contrast, a thick description depicts the particularities that make a person situated in complex narratives that reflect both their own choices as well as the context within which a person is born, lives, and dies. The details often reveal complexity, yes, but the details also convey the sun-splattered muddiness of life and human character. The details tell the story of a whole person, a full situation. In her poem Possibilities, Polish poet Wisława Szymborska details a list of her preferences and thus of herself. While she begins with simple preferences, I prefer movies, I prefer cats, I prefer the oaks along the Vorta. She moves on to more complicated preferences. I prefer the time of insects to the time of stars. I prefer to knock on wood. I prefer not to ask how much longer and when. I prefer keeping in mind even the possibility that existence has its own reason for being. These detailed preferences gesture to a particularity of a person and the deeper currents of values that shape her living. To prefer to knock on wood reveals an openness to risk and change. To prefer the time of insects to the time of stars suggests a strong appreciation for the small moments of the everyday over the cosmic questions of eternity. And thus, she closes the poem with her preference to keep in mind even the possibility that existence has its own way of being. In the face of all of existence, Szymborska risks trust in the unknown, holding out the possibility that there is a point to it all. I found this line, this poem, particularly poignant in a time of pandemic. Again and again, we have been faced with the unknown and with an experience of life doused in uncertainty. Amid such experience of life, are we also able to trust the possibility that still there is a reason for being? I find Szymborska's poem a powerful reminder to trust life, to trust our sense of what matters, and to trust our pleasures and our preferences. For months, so many of our preferences have been curtailed by restriction. This too has been a loss, as if our quirky particularities have been flattened along with the curve of infections. And now, as the possibility of reemergence arrives, I wonder not only how we will embrace our particular responses, but also how we will respond to the preferences of others. Many preferences remain restricted, such as all of us gathering here unmasked in the sanctuary together to sing together. Even as the CDC opens this possibility for vaccinated folks, we are a multi-generational community, and our youngest members have not yet had the opportunity to be vaccinated. Not to mention that even if we threw open the doors, I suspect many of you, even if you are vaccinated, would hesitate to return. And yes, I do know that there are others of you would be here on the word open. It is complicated. I do not have all the answers. I am grateful to the COVID team and the parish committee for their shared leadership on these difficult questions. Many of you have also weighed in through the vision discussions last winter and the more recent survey. Plans for more opportunities for your input are in the works. As we wrestle with our complicated differences, I think it is a good time to revisit what binds us together. It certainly isn't our shared opinions about safety, technology, and reopening. Nor are we bound by the same political affiliation, the same ideas of divinity, the same preferences for color, car, or song. Rather, we share a covenant to show up in this diverse, complicated community in a particular way, with open minds and loving hearts. Just 6 words. The simplicity of the words clouding how very hard it can be to live into their intent. And yet, how else do we live in a complex community of differences if not by keeping an open mind and a posture of love towards others? Such an approach asks us to listen for a thick understanding of others, to be curious about their preferences, fears, and hopes. Such curiosity about others may help move us beyond the certainty of what we think we know and into the varied complexity of human life and community. And yet, such a call for open-minded, compassionate understanding sounds hard while we are still also finding our own way. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty tired after more than a year of a pandemic. Questions about how to once again shift how I interact with the world bring some fun possibilities like the coffee shop, but it also creates new situations of difference and possible conflict, like whether to actually take off my mask at the town transfer station when no one else seems to be. Again, we have to figure it all out again. Perhaps rather than feel deflated by yet another round of questions about risk, safety, and different responses, we might draw strength from having been here before. Yes, again, we have done this before. We have adapted in new and very unexpected ways. We have habituated mask wearing and hand sanitizing. We can log into Zoom in our sleep. At least it feels that way to me. So we can do this hard thing and adapt again in the coming months as we emerge into what may perhaps be a post-pandemic future. But can we do this together? In the earliest days of the pandemic, there was a stupendous sense of unity and of being in this together. As challenging as those early weeks and months of pandemic were, I am grateful to have lived through that sense of coming together. Heck, as a congregation, we not only launched a massive mask-wearing project, we even shared rolls of toilet paper. Over the months, we've seen that sense of unity fade. And now, as the paths of possibility open up, we are not all looking at the same path forward. Perhaps this time our unity will not be in shared actions and experiences like donning masks. Rather, perhaps this time our unity will lie in our willingness to appreciate our differences with open minds and compassionate love as we all try to make sense of our existence. In the early pandemic days of feeling unified, the images and sounds of people coming to their windows and balconies to bang pots and pans in appreciation for healthcare workers moved many people. For today, I invited you to have your own pots and pans ready for the service. My apologies if you missed this. It was a last-minute idea. If you have them at hand, get ready. What I want for us to do is make some noise for each and all of us for having made it this far. To have endured the restrictions, the social distancing, the upheaval of our lives is no small thing. And then just this week, we witnessed the CDC lift the recommendation for mask wearing for fully vaccinated persons in many, though not all, situations. This marks a significant shift in the extraordinary, complicated path that we've traveled in similar and different ways. Rather than skip past this moment, I want to pause and to acknowledge the amazing resilience each of us has shown living through this past year. I forgot my pots and pans outside, but perhaps Matt can spotlight the outside camera because I know there's a whole crew of people out there with pots and pans, and unmute it, folks, and just make some noise. Amen.